there's this subconscious switch that's flipped in your brain that goes, oh, this is being recorded. You don't realize how hard it is until you've done it.
It's very deceptive of how you said you get tired.
Sometimes we're our bigger critic, and other people see that and go, no, that's what makes this real. There are so many different types of content and types of videos that you can create. And sometimes I think that we feel a challenge in the creative side of which direction to go. And so today we're going to really dive into some of the different variables, some of the different types of content, some of the pros and cons of each one, and sort of some of the outcomes that you can get from that. But I'll say this before we launch into all of this. There's really no wrong answer. And one of my favorite phrases, like, you're not going to break anything. If you pick something and go a direction, you can always pivot and turn it around and try something different. And sometimes it's the content that you never thought was going to work is what's going to work. But we're going to dive into all aspects of that. So joining me as always is Irina. And yeah, let's talk about different types of content.
Straight into it, right? The first one. What would be the first one? The first one that comes to mind for me is Talking Head.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's probably, that is a format that is very common that you see a lot in YouTube. And it's interesting because I don't even know. So like my background's in television, and that format is almost is more of a unique to YouTube and online video than other types of content. And sometimes it feels like I don't know where the evolution of that was, because certainly like you think of like newscaster, you think of like staring down at the lens and delivering information. There's a bit of an element of the lecturer or the teacher kind of element. So and I think it's common for YouTube because it's something that can really be done on your own. As a solo person to go, you need a camera, and honestly, that could be an iPhone, a webcam, that could be a camcorder, whatever you have, like just that. And you can set it up as a static shot. So you just need a tripod. You don't need somebody operating the camera or anything like that. And then sitting down and delivering the information. And so I think that's why it becomes most common. But I think also, to some degree, I think it's the most intimidating to actually pull off because of all those things, because it's just up to you. You're not relying on somebody else. You're not, it's all eyes on you talking directly into the lens. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's the psychological perspective of it again, of how do you yourself perceive what you're doing if it's just you? Do you think of it as you're presenting in front of millions of people, or do you think of it as you're just talking to a friend who is looking at you through the camera lens? That can change, I think, right away, that intimidation level, and even eliminate it.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I think that it's deceptively hard. When you watch YouTube and you see a bunch of people that are really good at it and very comfortable and looking at the camera and talking off the cuff or reading off a script. And I think it's sort of deceptive to go, oh, I could do that. And until you're actually sitting in a chair looking at the lens, and honestly, until you've done it a lot, you don't realize how hard it is until you've done it. And the other thing that I found is it's certainly one that's easy to batch shoot. And we'll talk about that as well today, of like, picking the type of content that you can accomplish a lot based on your schedule. And I think it's one that, like, theoretically, if I'm doing 10-minute videos, you could sit there and go, well, gosh, I could do, 5 of those in an hour, no problem. And you don't realize that it takes probably twice, if not 3 times, the length of the video to actually record it. And the other part that, sometimes when I'm doing a lot of those videos, you don't realize the the demand of your attention or your focus, you know, because it's like, yeah, you talk all day long, or you know, you're on phone calls and you're interacting on Zoom calls and that. It's a different thing when it's you're sitting in the hot seat, literally, staring at a camera and running through. It's just that engagement of your body and your voice and your attention and your focus and your, you know, spirit and your, you know, all those things that go into that, where it's like, to do that for 2 or 3 hours, I'm spent. I'm exhausted at the end of that. And it doesn't seem, and then you look it back and you're like, oh, I got 2 videos out of this, or 3 videos, you know? So that's something to keep in mind too, of like, you know, yes, try it. I think it's the lowest hanging fruit. It's easy to like accomplish and set up, get a nice backdrop, a light or two, a camera, and you could really kind of elevate the level of quality to it. But give it a try, because it's not as I don't want to over complicate it, but it's not as easy, or just I'll just turn on the camera and talk, as it might seem.
Yeah, and it's very deceptive of how you said you get tired. I didn't realize it until I had to record talking heads myself multiple times a week, to where I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna record like 3 of it today. And I sit down and I start one. By the end of that one, my voice is gone.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because I'm not used to talking like that nonstop all the
Right.
time. And I'm trying to say a sentence, like I have energy. I have the, still the energy for it, but I'm trying to say something and the words just are not coming out because my vocal cords they're done.
Yeah.
Like they're
Yeah.
like, oh, this is too much. We're not trained for that.
Right.
So it's very interesting how things like that, they kind of catch you off guard when you start doing that. But at the same time, I think try not to overcomplicate it, and don't aim for too long from the start. Just
Yeah.
start simple and start short, and then
Yeah.
you can build up from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, starting simple, like you said, is just to go, yeah, to start with, to say, hey, I'm just going to do one. And I think we touched on this last week, was the idea of picking those first couple of topics that are easy for you to talk about. I think that, you know, again, even if it's your elevator pitch and you've said it 100 times, I think it would be beneficial, if you're not going to script it out and read from a script, to at least write down the bullet points, because it's amazing too to be staring at the camera and all of a sudden all words go out of your brain, and you're just going, wait, what, how do I say that? Or you're constantly, you're aware of what you're doing, more so than if I was just talking to a person. There's this subconscious switch that's flipped in your brain that goes, oh, this is being recorded, and somebody, me and other people are going to watch this back. And again, you're going to start becoming your worst critic and go, oh, I don't like the way I said that. And, you know, and this is sort of a, you know, and I think we'll get into this in future episodes, of like how to host and how to speak on camera. But just as it pertains to the talking heads, is that, you know, as much as you can, you've got to sort of like not edit yourself. You've got to be able to just talk, just focus on the message, and know you can always edit that out. You can always take things out that you don't want to get. Um, and to your point of like, yeah, your voice gets tired. And the one that I find is like, you know, all of a sudden, like there's words I get hung up on, or I can't pronounce it right, or those words together just don't seem to fit. And the more that I try to do it, the worse it gets, and the worse it gets. That sometimes it's like, you just got to take a break, you know, walk away, get a drink of water, walk around,
Yeah.
say the alphabet, say something different than you just run into this like dead end of like, why can't I say those 2 words together? But
Yeah.
yeah,
And yeah. So like weird things happen when you start recording. You think, oh, I'm just gonna knock this out. Yeah, you start hanging up on words, and then you do some weird gestures that you would never do in real life, and you're
yeah.
like, wait, why did I do
Why
that?
did I do that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it is. And I think it's also, you know, it is a great way, even if you're not noticing that when you're filming, it's always nice to like watch those back and go, oh, I say that word a lot, or I really say, or I keep putting my hands over my mouth, whatever it is that like you notice, watching that back, which is just going to make you a better speaker anyway. So I think, yeah, I think talking heads are certainly like, it's a very YouTube centric type of videos. And I think it really works for the type of content that is about explaining things or teaching something or explainers, those types of that type of content, subject matter wise, I think benefits from the talking head. And there's, from a viewer standpoint, is that whenever I can see a person and see their eyes and see their mouth and see their expression explaining something, usually works better. And that should be the motivation of what you're doing, is that, yes, all this information I could put in a document, into a text, but having somebody with passion and excitement and authority speaking about that and making eye contact with me, even through the lens, is where the benefit of that comes. And I think that that's why it does so well on YouTube, because that type of content really likes that personal connection.
Yeah, and I think another point here is that it's very good for creating trust very quickly,
Yeah,
especially if you're a new brand, maybe you're just starting out and you, like you said, you want to create that connection, that trust of seeing a real person in front of you on camera explaining things, and seeing their passion and seeing how involved they are and how knowledgeable and um, how expert level they are at what they're explaining, that builds trust very, very quickly. None other medium, I think, can do that. Like if you write a blog post, sure, you can sound very confident and knowledgeable in the text that you're writing, but if you put your face to it and the audience can see you as a person actually explaining everything that is maybe written in a blog post with the confidence that you have about it, that is a completely different level. That is unmatched by any blog post, any type of short post, picture, or
for sure.
whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that like, it's that personal connection, and it's what we were talking about last week, of like, there's the power of video that can replace some of the onboarding calls or some of the sales calls and do the work for you. So some of this is just, this is what you'd be doing on a Zoom call with an individual potential client or customer anyway. But if you could do it with that same sort of intensity, that same sort of energy behind it, once in front of the camera, then that can do the work for you. And you kind of like invest that time into doing that, because that same trust can come through. And it's always amazing to me too, that like, how perceptive audiences are. And you'll get that feedback from the videos, that like, uh, things that you don't notice that you do, or a quality that you bring to it that nobody else can bring to it, that you don't think about. And there's certainly a version of this where you can hire somebody to be the presenter for you. And we've certainly done that for clients where we present for them, or we hire a host to present. But the more that, you, who are the one that's passionate about this product and service, can speak to that even if you don't feel it, the audience feels it. And they notice those little things of like sincerity and honesty and, passion, and those things that they read into. And that can come across in those videos. And I think too, like, I don't know if this is the best time to talk about this or not, but I think, kind of looking at the two sides of talking head videos, of what makes the difference between a good talking head video and a bad, I don't want to say bad, but a not as effective talking head video. Do you have kind of a perspective on that?
I think that's a very tricky question because when you start analyzing different things, what makes it good, what makes it bad, or what makes it not as effective,
Yeah,
it's if you start naming things, like for example, prescripting or not prescripting, right? It doesn't necessarily make it better because
yeah,
it's all how you approach it. So if you prefer having a structure, it's very helpful to have some sort of structure. I mean, in general, I think structure is very helpful. But then versus like scripting versus not scripting could be very different for different people.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are some people who talk really well naturally without any script, and it flows really well, and they say all the sentences correctly, and everything is
Yeah.
very, very good and sounds authentic. But there are some people who just get, again, they might get nervous in front of the camera
Yeah.
and just they can't put the words together and just it's not coming out, or what they're saying is they're just going in the loop and talking about one thing over and over and without realizing it. It happens a lot too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for those people, pre-scripting helps a lot. But then sometimes when you stick too much to the script and do like a teleprompter, even sometimes it might sound inauthentic.
Right. Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
like, how do you find that balance,
Right.
right, between the two? And I think it's up to you to kind of figure that out for yourself in terms
Yeah.
of what helps you and what doesn't help you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably the better way to frame it is like, you know, finding what works for you, finding what works for your personality and your time and your, you know, your prep and things like that. That it's like and I think along with that is also finding somebody that you can kind of align with, whether it be somebody else in your company or a friend or a spouse or somebody that through non-biased eyes can review or watch or give you some sort of feedback on that. Because yeah, sometimes it's I think it goes both ways. Sometimes we're our bigger critic and we go, oh, I don't like how I did that. I don't like that. And other people see that and go, no, that's what makes this real and makes it, you know, I connect to you because you sound like a regular person or whatever. It also goes the other way that I think we underestimate what we're doing as well, to go, oh, I feel like I'm over explaining that, or I'm saying too much, and somebody to go, no, I think that you need to explain more to that, or you need to add more detail or less detail. And I think that, you know, if you've never done it before, you're not going to get it right on the first time, and the first episode is probably not going to be your best work. I think it's more important to commit to the long term of going, hey, I'm going to try this for 10 weeks. And every week I'm just going to try this exercise of talking to the camera and try to make it a little bit better each time. And the other part that I see people kind of get off the rails a little bit on is they get too wrapped up in the background, the microphone placement, the camera, the lights, these detail things. And I think they are important, but I think the message is always going to be more important, and people are going to be more forgiving of like, oh, there's a reflection in your window, so I wasn't able to focus on what you're saying, versus, oh, I really got a lot out of what you were saying. And then those are incremental steps, because I think sometimes that becomes a distraction for us, that we get so, oh, I can't shoot today because the camera's not, you know, where I want it to be, and the microphone's not sounding right or whatever. Like, and we use that as a distraction to take us away from doing it, rather than just going, just jump in and do it. You can always make incremental steps as you go to improve.
And I think, like in general, very starter level recommendation to make sure your videos come out better. Of course, first of all, number one, make sure you have a determined topic of what you're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
Don't just be like, okay, the camera's on now. What am I talking? Like,
Right,
okay.
right.
Actually do that type of prep work. Actually know what you're talking about and know what type of point are you making. Why are you making this video? What do you want your audience to get out of it? How do you want them to react? Think
Right.
about that kind of ahead of time and let it shape your message and your delivery. And then if it helps, you can even create an outline, the structure outline of what you're going to say or how you're going to structure. Sometimes it's helpful on YouTube, you know, to have a hook, to have a specific like if you're talking to some potential clients to state the pain point and like go through kind of like the journey of your customer of how they would approach and then provide a solution, things like that, and then a summary. Like if you want to follow that type of structure, yes, it's very helpful to kind of write that out as an outline ahead of time, just so that you don't veer off and go on a tangent about something unrelated. But
Right.
in general, of course, again, it depends on the topic and it depends on what is it that helps you
Yeah.
specifically and what is it the goal is that you are recording this for.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in the early stages of like, writing out, even if you don't use it, but like writing out just that exercise of like, okay, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about this. Here's a good strong hook. This is a good closing. And then again, you can always back if you're finding you're not needing that as much or you're not needing to reference that as much. Well, then maybe the next time you don't need to put as much into that, or have something written out, have a good strong hook written out, but then go, oh, let me riff on that a couple of times. Let me do a couple of different variables, and then I can always pick the best one. It's about, planning, preparing, sitting down and just doing it. And again, if it takes just going, hey, I'm not going to release this. This is just a practice run. Then do that by getting insight to other people. Um, and I think, I'm just trying to be honest about this format, because I think that we get a lot of people that's the only idea that they have, the only version of creating content online is some version of talking head. And we're going to explore some other options within that, because I think that, I've seen too many people that are like, okay, I want to make YouTube videos and I want to talk about XYZ over this series. And then they get into it, and I think they have unreal expectations of how smooth that's going to go. That I always, I shouldn't say always, but there's times where I try to steer people in a different direction. Um, and and there's two other versions of this that I think we can talk about. And one is, and I guess they're sort of variables of the same thing, but one is, and I don't know if this necessarily works as a long ongoing series, but there is a sort of the interview style of Talking Head where you have somebody off camera sitting beside your camera that's getting this information from you and is asking you predetermined questions that maybe you came up with together, or even if it's somebody in your company that they know the answers to, but using them as sort of that scripting point for you to go, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your company. Tell me the why of you started your company. And there's those kind of basic questions, which now does two things. One, it takes your attention off of the camera and onto a person. And now it's not as much of a conversation as much as an interview, but there's somebody else there. They're holding your hand, they're walking you through this, and all you need to focus on is what is the last question they asked. Even if you wrote up the questions, they're going to help guide you through that. And they're a sounding board right then and there to go, tell me more about that process from the beginning. So you do this, and then you do this next step. And then what was the third step again? Because that wasn't clear. And then you can reiterate that. So it's in a viewpoint wise, this is sort of a version of the talking head where it's just just basically from a viewer standpoint, your eye line's just different. And now it feels like, oh, they're talking to somebody off screen. I don't ever have to see that person off screen. I don't have to hear what they're saying, but it's just a different framing. And I know we've done a couple of those for different clients that have worked better to, I don't want to say pull, but like direct the content out of the presenter.
Yeah, and I think that's a very fast way to make a person to sound more authentic and make them more relaxed right away. When I used to shoot videos for businesses and actually come out and set up the equipment and do it all myself, I would always 100% tell them, hey, I'm going to be standing right here next to the camera. When you're talking, just talk to me. Don't worry about the camera.
Right.
And I cannot tell you how many times they instantly went, oh, but that's so much better. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they come to it nervous and very tense, and
Right.
they're like, oh my gosh, this camera is going
Yeah.
to be in my face. What am I going to do? And as soon
Yeah.
as I say, just look at me and talk to me, don't worry about this camera right
Right.
here, they're like, oh,
Yeah.
oh, that's so much better. Thank you. And
Yeah.
on camera,
Exactly.
if you stand right next to it and they're talking to you, sometimes you won't even tell
Right.
if they're not looking at the camera. And
Yeah.
it's not really important. But if you want to create more of a dialogue feel of they are talking to a real person, and you want the viewer to know they're actually talking to a real person,
Yeah.
not just talking, then step a little bit away from the camera so they have a little bit more of an angle
Yeah.
off camera.
Yeah.
That way
Yeah.
there's like, it's a conversation. It's not just one person talking.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think honestly that format is so effective, and truly, like, to your point, is like it just makes people more, I mean, just that slight adjustment, all of a sudden it takes the pressure off of you as the presenter to go, I'm setting up the camera, I'm lighting the studio, I'm getting my microphone, I'm doing all this, and there's something very intimidating about looking at a lens, and I get it. That now, just by making that slight adjustment, having somebody in the room with you, and just you're looking at them and you're getting, that real-time feedback, but also you're getting that sort of just a different positioning, a different kind of quality to how you're speaking, because it's you're not, it's like we were talking about, it's like, imagine you're talking to one person when you're looking at the lens. Now you actually are just talking to one person. And I think that comes through as viewers. The other thing too is that it's a little bit of a subconscious thing that happens where we go, oh, who is this? We know that they're being interviewed, right? Well, us as viewers, we can feel that. And again, because, going back to my background, that's a very common television kind of setup, is that man on the street kind of microphone talking, interview, news kind of what happened, how did this all start kind of thing. And we're very perceptive to that kind of quality, to notice like, oh, this person's being interviewed. They're talking to somebody off camera. They're talking about themselves. Somebody is asking them questions, and immediately, subconsciously, we start going, wait, who is this person? Should I know who they are? They're being interviewed. That elevates them on this sort of, I don't want to say pedestal, but this, like, they just get elevated a little bit to go, oh, this is somebody being interviewed. Are they on this show? Are they who are they? And we just start, it adds a level of credibility that you don't get just by, oh, I'm just talking into my cell phone. Go ahead.
Another little psychological thing that happens when you realize there is somebody asking a question, you go, oh, wait, if they are asking a question and they're interested, that means I need to know that too. So I'd better listen carefully.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's like this element, they ask the question, it means it's important. So I need to listen. I'm going to pay attention to it.
Yeah. And something else that I hadn't really thought about until you were just saying that I'm like, the element too of us as viewers going, here's somebody answering somebody's questions, that as a viewer, I start going, oh, I could be heard in this. I have a question. Can I submit a question? Can I ask a question in the comment? Like, you create this kind of engagement, because now it doesn't feel like I'm just being talked at. It feels like I'm watching this question in real time. And again, spoiler alert, everything you see online and on video is fake. I mean, there's some degree of like preparation or planning. So it's like, this isn't rocket science to go, even if you're planning out those questions ahead of time, that it's all about how it's presented. And we're not trying to hide the fact that, like, oh, it's just my assistant that's sitting off camera asking the questions, or it's just my spouse, or it's just, my brother is just sitting off camera. We're not trying to hide any of that. It's just that now we are going, this exchange, this question and answer exchange, that, oh, I could be a part of that, or I want to be part of that conversation. And going back to what we were just talking about last week of like content ideas to go, yeah, we'll incorporate that. End with, hey, if you have a question and you'd like me to answer, submit it in the comments or whatever. And that could be another video where now you have your interviewer that has, a couple of questions from the audience, from the comment section, from your email list, whatever, that they could now ask you as well. So you can kind of build out your content even in that structure.
And that made me think of actually a client that we used to have who, she's a public speaker, and she can talk really well to an audience, but when we had to put a camera in front of her, she got a little tense.
Yeah.
And what got her to loosen up is she said, I need somebody to sit in front of me and ask me questions.
Yeah.
As if this is a live event or live type of practical, like, I don't know, thing that I'm doing, like a workshop or something.
Right.
And we had a separate person who was kind of on the same wavelength with her in terms of the topic that she wanted to talk about. And she was just sitting there and asking her questions. And right away, the public speaker got much more comfortable on camera. And that's a very interesting kind of situation to where you would think, oh, public speakers, there's nothing to them to talk in front of anybody, including the camera. Turns out it might be a little different.
Yeah. And there's a psychological element to that like, I think we as humans, whether we're a public speaker or we're on a stage or we're, taking questions from the audience or whatever, or we're at a social gathering and somebody asks us, a question like, oh, what's your favorite dip here at the park? Like whatever inconsequential question that is, I think the minute that somebody asks you a question, there's this feeling of like, oh, I have to give them an answer. Like, I can't just be like, oh, I don't want to answer that and walk away. Like you have to put together sentences to give them some answer, whatever the degree of that is. And it sort of takes you out of your own way because now it is about that other person because you're going, oh, let me give you my opinion. Let me give you my thought. I happen to know something about that. I do want to share that information, and it removes you from that element, less so than like if it's just you talking to the camera. And so I think what the client you're referring to is like, that was the element of like, yeah, she did really well in these public events because all eyes are on her. She has to come up with this answer. And it's stuff that she knows about that she may filter on herself, or like sitting there in front of the camera, I saw her a lot of times just rattle off all the information she knows just to like keep talking rather than going, no, focus on answering this question. And it fine-tuned and gave a laser focus to what you were delivering. And just, again, it's a simple change, just having somebody else in the room that then fires a different kind of posture in you to go, oh, I'm doing something different. And to me, I think it starts making things a lot easier.
Absolutely. So I have a question. Here is another type of talking head video that seems to be quite common these days, is when a person takes a phone, hold it in front of their face, and just go somewhere. And it's kind of like a walk and talk.
Walk and talk,
and there are some people who say, oh, I'm vlogging like that. But then really, are you really vlogging, or are you really recording just a talking head? So because that kind of, I don't know if it's going to be like a bridge to our next type of a vlog. Because when I think of a vlog, I would think more of a like actually showing things that happen versus just your face. And there's a lot of people who call this type of video content vlogging. I think it's still talking head. If you're just holding a camera in front of your face and you're walking wherever you're walking, it's just your face. Mostly in the frame, and you're talking. So that's a talking head, right?
It's an interesting topic because I totally agree with you on both sides. That I think I hear that called a vlog a lot of times, and I see that and think that's a talking head. And I guess and we've kind of had these conversations internally about like where our division of, on a production side or post-production side of like, well, what is it required to do this type of video versus what is it required to do that type of video? So for us, we're looking for more definitive lines, and then things start getting blurry like that. And I think it needs a different term, because I'm like, there is a version that's like that is different than a talking head, but format wise is like a talking head. And I think the difference is it's like we need a bridge word between talking head and vlog, because when I think of talking head, and I think when most people do, is like they think of that produced static camera, fixed background, maybe layering in some B-roll as you talk about different things or showing a graph. So it feels planned out, it feels structured. Whereas the other talking head of like walking down the street, just filming yourself, usually doesn't have B-roll, usually doesn't have cutaways, and is usually, I wouldn't say all the time, but is usually less edited. It's more very much not scripted, very much like stream of consciousness, more just like these are thoughts I'm having of what happened today, sharing the story that just happened. Again, whether it's staged or not, that's the vibe behind it. And so, yeah, what I'm like, both are true. I'm like, that's not a vlog, but it's not a talking head either. But at the same time, it is a talking head, and it is it's like that. It's a weird, kind of separate point. And I think, so let's talk about that a little bit. Whatever, maybe we need to come up with our own term on that, because we've gone through this with clients as well, where we talk about scripted versus unscripted. And there's even some debate in there, because when we go unscripted, doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have bullet points or an outline, or scripted doesn't always mean you're writing out every word that you're saying. It's more so along, this is the path, this is the order that's going. Because there's certainly scripts and there's presenters that can read scripts that make it feel like I am talking off the cuff. I'm reading every word, but I'm saying it as though I'm forming these thoughts as I go. So I don't know. To me, I think that's more the difference in those two styles of going. One is very much scripted, of like, I'm going to hit all these bullet points. The other one is more off the cuff, unscripted feeling kind of thing.
What about, I have all my bullet points, I have a structure, I'm going to hit this point, this point, this point, and then I take a camera in front of me and I go, let's say this one way I go, and I talk about this point. And then I'm like, all right, I'm going to go get in the car and drive to this other place right here. And I'm going to walk in that place right there, holding the camera and talking about the second point. Yeah. And then go and hit every point in a different location, for example, and then put it all together. And it's still just you holding the camera and talking.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No,
I agree. Yeah. That's, that's another version. Cause and I think I maybe, I'm just trying to think of like how to organize this. Cause I'm like, I think it might be worth talking about the other side of that, of going, okay, let's discuss full on vlog. And then I think there's some versions in between all of that, of that kind of connect those dots. So, and I would say, to your point of what you're describing, is like I think in terms of talking head, there isn't a limitation to like, okay, I'm going to sit in one location and say everything that I want to say here. There is, and honestly, some of the best talking head videos, engaging talking head videos I've seen, has been some version of that, where it's like, oh, they're in front of a whiteboard here, and then they walk off, and they're driving, along, and they're talking about this, and then they're, but you can tell it's very like documentary style, of like, this was all planned out. They knew that they were going to go there. They knew they were going to talk about this there, to exactly how you're describing it. And to me, that starts opening up a whole nother realm of like, investment in time and resources of like planning and all of that to make it look natural and make it look, off the cuff or organic. But there is a lot of planning that went into that. So, um, so yeah, let's talk about vlogging, and then let's kind of meet the two in the middle. Um, Vlogging, again, I think that that's a very unique online video sort of format. Um, it comes from, a video blog, or we think of blogs as like articles or diaries posted, public journaling kind of thing. And so vlogging came out of that in terms of, oh, now I'm going to video this. I'm going to document my day, record. And I think vlogging does become a very much a you doing it. I think that there needs to be an element of the personal perspective on that. I think you go to the next level and it becomes a documentary if somebody else is recording you doing those things. That gets into a whole nother messy category because I'm like, yeah, there's some very big vloggers that have a crew of people that vlog for them, and are setting up the cameras. But for the sake of this, we'll keep vlogging as like, that is, you are documenting that. So there is an element of I'm walking along and I'm talking into my camera about XYZ, but then I think vlogging requires turning the camera around and showing what you're talking about, or showing where you're having lunch and where you went to this business meeting and all those elements. Because the idea of it is you are documenting, recording your day, your week, your event. There's certain like vacation vlogging or food vlogs that are like, whatever that subject is, but we're seeing it as you're experiencing it or as you're doing that. Is that a fair definition of that?
Yeah, I think so. And I think also there's, like in Talking Head, there's a deceptively hard part to vlogging too that people don't realize from the start, because we watch a vlog and we think, oh, it's just a person going about their day and just showing what they're doing. But then when you actually start doing it, to make it engaging and to make it interesting, you have to figure out, what shot do I show that actually looks good on camera?
Yeah.
How do I show them that I am walking into this coffee shop versus just a camera floating into the door?
Yeah.
I have to set up a camera somewhere, walk in, then come back, get my camera, make sure no one steals it while I'm walking into this coffee shop. And like, there's a lot of those funny things that vloggers do that you don't realize you would do, like setting up a camera somewhere on the other side of the street, walking in, then running and getting your camera.
Yeah. That is, I would say vlogging is probably up there as far as like the time involvement and the challenge factor of it, because and I think on too, all those things that you just described of like, setting up the camera and making it look like you're walking past it and getting the camera and all that. There's that. So you have to think like a cinematographer or videographer of like, how do I capture this? It's one thing to sit down in a restaurant and order your food. It's another thing to how do I capture that? And now, there's an element that you need to respect others. You can't be out in public. You can be in public and film other people, but I think that you want to be respectful of other people's space, and other people have strong feelings about whether they're on camera or not. And so I have found in situations like that just telling people and just saying, hey, do you mind if I'm recording this for this XYZ. Do you mind if you're on that, or do you want me to try to avoid filming it? And most people will be, oh, that's fine. Thank you for letting me know. Shoving cameras in people's faces, nobody likes that. So there's that element. There's like the, just how to do that. And so if it took you an hour to eat lunch, again, plan for it to take 2 hours, because you're going to need to get all that stuff. The other part of it, that is you don't think about is like, now all those elements of when I was sitting in my room by myself talking to the camera, I'm now doing, but I'm in public. and I'm at the park and other people are watching me talking to my camera and they're looking to be funny or they're judging me or I could catch them out of the corner of my eye, like wandering around, see what, and it is a whole another layer of, oh, now all my confidence is starting to go away because I now it does feel more performative, or I feel like other people are watching me, whether they care what you're doing or not. Which is another takeaway is like 9 times out of 10, people don't care what you're doing. They're
Mm-hmm.
too focused on what they're doing. So, to get out of your way on there, but there's more layers to that as you do that. Um, there's some vloggers that I follow on YouTube that I watch their content. I have no interest in really what their business is or what they do, but like they're just very compelling, interesting. Like there's a high entertainment quality to it, to the ones that are done and executed well. And I think that's something to kind of keep in mind too, is like, if that's a skill set and something that you want to strive for to try to do, then leaning into that and cause I think they can be very powerful and very useful pieces of content.
Yeah, because I think the purpose of a vlog is to invite the audience to be part of your day or part of your
Yeah.
life and part of what you're doing and make them feel like they're there with you. And so that kind of requires that world building for them.
Yeah.
And because you are in the environment where you are, it's not just that easy to bring an audience with you. You have to like build that out for them throughout all
Yeah.
these different shots and how you film and how you do that and how you show that.
Yeah.
I think it could depend on what type of vlog I guess you're doing, but at the end of the day, you are building that world that you're inviting them into.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, there this is a wide scope of like lots of different versions of this, and there's also and again, it depends on your business. It depends on, going back to your why, going back to your goals of the videos and things like that. That anything that's sort of in the service industry, the actions of doing something, working on something, creating something, those kind of physical attributes to a business that lend themselves really well to a vlog. Whether you're making t-shirts or you're fixing, cars, there are, you know, and again, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about too, of like finding that version of the content that can be incorporated into your day. If I'm a mechanic and I have cars coming in constantly and I'm always working on them and doing different, projects or different, fixes on these cars, is there a way to just put a GoPro on your chest or put a camera up in the corner, or, where it's like you can almost set it and forget it and just go about your business and record it, and then maybe afterwards do a little talking head or confessional booth sort of thing. Go, hey, you know what? This car came in and I thought it was this first, but then I tried that didn't work. And then we did this and we got it fixed and this is good and blah, blah, blah. Like you could do that and then put those together. So throughout the course of the day, you see 10 cars, you could, that could be 10 different videos.
Yeah.
So there's that version of like, how do you incorporate it into your day?
And I think this is interesting too, like that just talking about these two types of videos, talking head and vlog, kind of gives us an idea of every type of video you can make, because with pretty much every type of video, what you're going to be making is, first of all, you have a point, you have a story, and then you are either capturing yourself talking or you're capturing B-roll or both. And a lot of the time, you're going to be doing both. And then the way that a type of video comes out of all this is what is the best way that it all is going to work for what you're talking about or for you specifically. Maybe it's going to be more talking headshots, but you can also go out and shoot some B-roll while you're at it to show and demonstrate what you're talking about. Or if you're vlogging, maybe you do need to stop and sit down and kind of explain more about the topic or the thought process of something that came up during the event that you went to or during your day.
Yeah.
So there's so many combinations and variations of that. But I think the essentials of making a video that is engaging come down to just a few basic elements of what is your topic, why are you doing this, what are you trying to achieve with this video. And this is a huge part of determining the why and the goals and the structure and the theme of it up front. And then capturing the story, capturing the narrative, capturing the talking head or voiceover, and then capturing B-roll to illustrate. That's all that is. And then however you combine that, that will determine what type of video you end up with.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. We kind of backed into, the element that we were discussing last week when we were talking about what this episode was going to be about, that when we started listing out different types of videos, we kind of fell into the same sort of conversation, which was there really, when you break it down, there's very few differences. When you really if you want to put a label on these types of content, there's always going to be overlap. There's always going to be some sort of gray or blurry line there. And I think that my big takeaway from that is, one, that I wouldn't get as hung up on the terminology of am I doing a talking head, or is this a vlog, or is this, well, if I do that, that makes it this, and I don't want to be, and so it really opens up a lot of opportunity. And the other part of it is I think, more so than trying to figure out what type of, leading with, I want to create this type of video, or what type of video am I going to do, but like you said, is answering those questions of, what is it that I want my audience to feel or experience or get out of my video at the end? And then really understanding that and really analyzing that question, and then backing into and kind of working your way backwards of what that means for your content. Do I need to show people what I'm doing? Do I need to explain it to people what I'm doing? Do I need to use visuals and I lost the word, the examples and diagrams and charts to do this? Do I want to answer questions? And each video could be a little variation, or you can kind of evolve it over time and go, oh, this format, I think, is what my type of business, the type of work that I do, needs. And you can kind of formulate that as you go and kind of grow and develop to create your own version of content. And it, I don't think you need to necessarily feel like you have to fit into a specific mold.
Right. It's just what is the story you're telling and how you're telling it, and it's all up to you. You can be as creative as you want. And I think the only one maybe that could be a little bit different type of video is what we're doing is podcast, because that's more of a collaboration between multiple people. And that doesn't necessarily involve going out and shooting B-roll. You could, to illustrate certain points, but if it's just an ongoing conversation, it's more of a collaboration and kind of hearing out different opinions, hearing out different levels of expertise, the people involved, and different topics being covered.
Yeah. And I think podcasting is still one of the most truest, honest forms of content. And I mean, I certainly, there's a way to script it and to control it, but this is our 4th episode of this, and I think every time I've come into these episodes with my own ideas of I want to make sure I say these 5 things, and every single time through the course of the conversation, either you'll say something that I was going to say, and I'm like, great, you covered it, I don't need to talk about that. Or you'll say something that will inspire me and go, I never even thought about talking about this. Is a great thing. Or it literally, the whole episode kind of takes a new direction. I'm like, oh, there goes my, all the things I wanted to talk about are irrelevant because we stumbled on something that I think is more important than I want to talk about. And I say all that just to say that it's so organic because it is a 50-50 split in this. It isn't one person interviewing the other. It isn't I'm talking about this and you're interjecting comments. It is in its truest form should be this equal parts of like, you want to talk about this, I want to talk about this. We find these new topics to talk about and kind of explore that. And every time I look at the clock, I'm like, man, it's almost been an hour. And we've talked about so much stuff that I never could have anticipated was going to come out of this one idea of like, let's talk about content, types of content. And I think that's about as honest and true as you can get when it comes to content, because you are accountable to another person.
Yeah, I think podcasting is fascinating because each episode feels like it has its own life. Like it
Yeah,
lives and it writes itself as it
right.
goes, and it can go anywhere. Like you said, so
Yeah,
many topics come up that are not on my list. Like they're not on my
yeah,
plan to talk about, but somebody said something, and it's like, oh wow, let's expand on that.
right, right. Yeah, and so I think in terms of content, if you are looking for something like an easy, I don't think anything's easy, but like if you're looking for kind of the most accessible version of content, podcasting is certainly something to explore. If you have somebody that you can trust and work with and can have these kind of conversations with, certainly there's versions of podcasting that are solo that you can, you don't see that as much, but there is that version that's more of just again, just sort of a stream of consciousness. But I think the conversation element is sort of doable because you can go, hey, let's talk about this topic and then let's see where it goes. And I think that is probably, I think it's the one that probably people don't often start thinking of going, and they start thinking, well, it'd be much easier to just do a talking head. But like we described, is like there's some more elements that go into that versus, all right, let's get on a Zoom call and just record it of us having a conversation about these topics.
Yeah, I think interestingly enough, because we did go through the phase where we recorded all these talking head videos for Moonward Media when we just
Yeah.
started the brand. And now we're doing these podcast episodes. And I feel like it took me so much longer to just record and edit these talking heads versus us
Yeah.
just doing a podcast like this.
Right. Yeah, and there's certainly like there's I think there's an expectation that's built into podcasting too of like, I'm planning, if I'm going to click on this and watch this or listen to this, I'm going to invest an hour or a half hour into this. I'm expecting it to be more raw and organic. If I turned on a podcast and it felt like I was listening to people, unless it was like a radio drama, but if I was listening to people like reading a script going, I want to make this point, and then point number 2 is this, and then point number, even if it is a planned out like webinar and like, okay, we're going to talk about these topics, I think I expect it to be a little bit more natural and a little bit more raw and a little bit more conversational, because I'm along for the ride and I want to get to know these people that are sharing these ideas. And so it should take the pressure off of like, okay, this doesn't need to be overly produced. It doesn't need to have all these extra elements to it. And it can just be what it is and let the content, the story, be the most forward.
I think it's the most underestimated probably format, and how we're talking about some deceptively hard parts of talking head and vlog. I think podcasts have some very deceptively easy parts on the
Yeah.
contrary
Yeah.
to that.
Good point. Yeah. 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 I think that, and, we've talked about this before, but it's like when you talk about delivering the content, you kind of check all the boxes with a video podcast, and you can get long form, short form, audio only, video. It can live on multiple formats. And so you can really get a lot out of one recording session, in that. And I think, it's, as we're kind of, looking at all the different types of content, and I think that, the important thing is like leading with the subject matter, leading with what you are comfortable with. And I think that this is the part that, and again, this could turn into a whole nother episode, but I find that there feels like there's this demand on us as business owners when it comes to video content, that we need to have all the answers, or we need to also be good at this. Whatever your business is, I'm going to preach up and down that, like, oh, you could benefit from video content, organic, paid for. Like, that's obviously that's my industry, so I understand that. But there's I don't think anybody's arguing with that and going, oh no, this business sector does not need video content. But I think the what comes along with that is all of a sudden we're supposed to be good at video, or we're supposed to be good at operating a camera or setting up. And there's a technical side of that is hard to do. And I think finding that type of content that fits you and your personality, and don't feel like you need to learn a whole nother sector of, like we were just talking about. It's like, if you can get on a Zoom call, you can record a video podcast. And so if that's your skill level, focus on that. Now, the other side of the coin is, I think that especially the younger business owners that are coming up that grew up around video and with a camera in their pocket, and they're, always using editing systems and stuff like that. There are people that are just, that's not their business, but they grew up around that and they understand it and they know it. Then I would steer you towards, okay, well then you can utilize some of that. You can do a more vlog or record B-roll and have fun because you enjoy doing that. And that is part of, you can incorporate that as part of your day. But I whichever side of the spectrum that you fall, don't feel like you need to flip to the other side, and you can embrace what your skill set and what you're good at to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is no strict guidelines of you need to be doing these types of content.
Yeah.
It's more of trying out things and discovering what works and what doesn't for you and what resonates with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we talk about, like, all the types of content, and I think that it's more about leaning into, what you're, it's like what we were talking about last week of, like, what you're going to be able to accomplish, setting yourself up for success to go, if I do this version or I do this thing, it's going to achieve the goal that I'm looking to achieve. And that's the best. That's always going to win out over, oh, but everybody's telling me I should do this type of content. And really, I think, following that path of knowing that, hey, I need this video content to help my business grow. And I need this content to help my business get their message out, whatever that goal is. And we have a document that we put together that is all about how to create these types of videos that help, that work, that a sales funnel that actually converts, that actually turns into your business goals. And I think focusing on how that is laid out and having each video have a purpose to what it's doing, answering those questions, the rest of it will, whoa, let me not hit my mic. The rest of it will sort of work itself out, that you go, the type, the version, the actual production of what you're doing should be secondary to, oh, now I have this video content that's out there that's actually working. And I'll put a link in the description so that people can download that and kind of look through how that's laid out, of the different types of goals behind the videos.
Yep, that's perfect. And I think also, if you just have trouble brainstorming and coming up with different ideas, you can also check out our tool that we built. It's a chatbot named Cosmo, and we trained Cosmo on all our processes and the knowledge base that we use ourselves to brainstorm with our clients. So you can sign up for free and just plug in your questions. It will help you get started really quickly to have this like very quick brainstorming session of how to get started, how to get going, and maybe some also tips on how to do it more efficiently and how to make it work for you.
Yeah, that's a great place to start, because sometimes that's the tricky part, is like we are only thinking of what we are aware of or what's in our circle of, like, Well, I know there's talking heads, and I know there's vlogs. I don't think I could do either one. So, like, yeah, just to have a sounding board, just to have some back and forth conversation with a knowledge base that understands video content, and understands the different types. To go, what else? What am I missing? Because I hope we established through this episode is like, yeah, there's a lot of different terms or different frames around content, but really it all comes down to very very few distinguishing remarks of each of those versus it's not a whole new thing to learn. So I think getting that input from Cosmo will help you out tremendously.
Yeah, and just go experiment and figure out what it is that resonates with you.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Another great episode, and we're going to leave it at that, and we will see you again next week.